Welcome. I'm Alfred Weber, and I'm here in a second interview with Tolek, who is the human contactee and representative of the Andromeda Council. And we have already done one interview, an article with Tolek, focusing on some very good news, and that is the reported news of the defeat of the Orion Gray and Draco Reptilian factions and the practical end of their occupation of our planet, kind of in the mopping up phases now. Welcome, Tolek.
Alfred, good afternoon. Good to chat with you again.
I'm just thinking, for those who may have not heard the first interview yet, why don't we briefly recap some of the information that you were able to share in that interview?
Sure. I'll touch on some of the major topics that I touched on in the first interview. I'll try to keep it brief. I'll talk briefly about how I came into contact with people from the Andromeda Council, and beyond that, if there are any specific topics you'd like me to touch on, including the end of the war, I'll do that.
Sure.
But to make a long story really short, I had physical contact with a human gentleman by the name of Zoltar back in 1993 in an area out in the desert south of Tucson, Arizona. And it happened 3 times. He brought me back in time to the area of Kentucky, West Virginia, the mountains and hills of that area, and we watched a family somewhere in the 1840s or 1850s during their arduous life out in the wilderness. I didn't have any contact after that until, actually it was this weekend, 1 year ago, the weekend of September the 10th, 2010, where I like to say I heard it in my head or I heard it in my mind. Actually, a couple things happened. I heard, "Hey, look up." Well, excuse me. I looked up, and essentially there was a cloud formation of what looked to be a Native American man with a band across his forehead, and it was a very distinct image. It was around just around sunset, and there were colors there, but there was no mistake that there was this profile image of a Native American gentleman. And he said, "It's me, it's Zoltar, remember me?" And so I said, "Oh yeah, how are you doing? Long time no talk." We hadn't talked in a while. And he started asking me questions about what he felt would be appropriate positive actions that the Andromeda Council could take in helping to introduce people of Earth to reality that there is extraterrestrial life out in the cosmos, and moreover that they live in different dimensions and they're humans, much like we are Earth humans, of all different races, colors, sizes, and shapes, and essentially that we're not alone. So we started this conversation, and that led into more conversations. And during the process, and I'll address the question right now, this is actually a good time, in reading some comments on some of the last topics that we talked about in the last interview, there were some people that asked about the names that I provided of Zoltar, who's a commander, and specifically, he is the commander that resides and is in charge of the main biosphere where many of the Andromeda Council meetings are held. I also spoke with a gentleman by the name of Baltor, who's the head of security for that biosphere. I've spoken with Azar, who's the chief medical officer of her team. I've spoken with Vice Chairwoman Tanya, who is the vice chairwoman of the Andromeda Council, and I've also spoken with Chairman Darka. And I'm bringing this up specifically this time around by name because they may sound like unusual names, and they could quite well be unusual names in terms of people thinking of the genre of science fiction. That would be appropriate, but please understand, Alfred, and to anybody else that's listening, these are public persona names. Much like you and I, every one of these people was born with a first name and a last name. The name of Azar and Baltor and Zoltar are public persona names because they work every single day of their lives in a public position. They live on a biosphere which has been sent to Earth space, and it has a job to do. And one of their jobs is to help smooth the transition of this solar system and planet Earth into the fourth dimension. And so, to address any people's concerns about the science fiction-ness or the strangeness of those names, those are simply public persona names. Moving on.
Right. Yeah.
Sure, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. Just to mention, which we mentioned at the beginning of the last interview to the viewers, Tolek is a 20-year veteran professional in the computer industry.
Computer software industry, yes.
Yeah. And I have spoken to people and have read the comments of people who have known Tolek for a number of years and can verify his character. And he does not, at this time, wish to make his human identity public because he's continuing his career in the computer software industry and maintaining an identity as well as a representative of the Andromeda Council. So that is why you only see myself and then you hear Tolek's voice in this video. Thank you.
Right. Oh, you're welcome. And to be specific, the name or the word Tolek is a name that they've given me. They from the beginning, I think it was probably like by the end of week 2 of communication, they were calling me Tolek over and over and over again. So that's, if you will, that's my own assigned public persona name. So I'm going by that name simply because they gave it to me. I think the last topic that we touched on, probably in some detail, which was the topic that's most relevant to the first discussion that we had, is about the possibility of war, the reality of a war, and the outcome of that war in outer space between the reptilian Orion Gray factions and the aligned planets of the Andromeda Council, of which the Galactic Federation is part. And there are at least 12 senior member seats on the Andromeda Council. Each chair is chaired by a representative from a certain star system, from a certain home planet. And the greater majority of the people on the Andromeda Council they thrive in the fourth dimension, fifth, or sixth dimension. I'm not aware of any people any higher than that, but in terms of how they live every day, they are higher dimensional beings. And in terms of the war, the outcome, as the website says, the good guys have won. The combined forces of the Andromeda Council decidedly defeated the Gray and Reptilian factions, and that ended late January, February of 2011, and the mop-up has been going on since then. And when they say mop-up or cleanup, they're talking about getting rid of the remaining Greys and or Reptilians, and there are far more Greys, underground, in bases, in a variety of places across not only the U.S., but across the world. And they're getting rid of them as fast as they possibly can. That's the short version of that story. And if you'd like me to share any more details, I'd be happy to.
No, that sounds fine. One item I think that I would like to clarify. You, in our talk prior to the interview, you mentioned a distinction that you like to make between the Galactic Federation and the Galactic Federation of Light that I found to be interesting. Could you describe that for the audience?
Yeah, I would be happy to. Without getting into a lot of detail, I'll give you the top-down difference, and I'll start at the top. The Galactic Federation is an assembly of star systems and planets. It's approximately 140 star systems, and I think in excess of 300 some odd planets, and it's headed specifically out of the Tau Ceti star system. I have spoken with the ambassador from Tau Ceti. He comes from the planet Zeta, which is Xeta, and again, it is decidedly headquartered out of the Tau Ceti star system. There has been other discussion that I've heard of regarding a group called the Galactic Federation of Light. And I see them many times where they'll introduce themselves, and only somewhere later on in their writing do they start introducing the topic of light in the conversation. And what I've learned quite clearly is that they're co-opting the name of the original Galactic Federation. They are not based out of Tau Ceti. The second group is based out of Sirius, I believe Sirius B, and they're headed by a couple of re-engineered reptilians. And they report to reptilians. So I would, certainly in my shoes, or for anybody else that's doing their own research, look closely at everything that you read and look for the differences, because any references to the Galactic Federation should be addressing a body of 139 or 140 star systems based out of Tau Ceti. And there is no reference to of light. This of light bunch comes out of Sirius, and there's a definite reptilian connection to it. And I would certainly look very closely at any of that information that you're reading or hearing about. That's
Sure.
about as much as I want to say about that for now.
Yeah, good. No, you're the second Exopolitics TV guest that has mentioned that, so I thought it was good just to have that information out, and we've dealt with that topic.
Yeah, sure.
So
My pleasure.
So we can move on. Now, there's a great deal of discussion in the mainstream news, in the scientific world, in the space authority world like NASA and ESA, and on the internet with regard to Elenin. And as I understand it, you have been in conversations with your contacts at the Andromeda Council biosphere. These biospheres are like small, self-enclosed kind of spaceship, small planet type things. Is that what it is?
Right. As an example, this particular biosphere is just about the size of what we would call planet Pluto, in terms of a size reference. It's about the size reference of planet Pluto. It's approximately the same shape. It's round. There are about 50,000 crew members and their families that live inside. There are 26 floors. It includes at least a couple of parks and ponds. There are plant-eating animals, like deer and horses that graze near the ponds and in the parks. They're spaceships, but they're in the shape of a planet. But they're called a planetoid because they're so small, like I said, about the size of Pluto. And everybody works inside. And of course, there's artificial light and there's artificial oxygen, and they host a number of Andromeda Council meetings and subcommittee meetings. And I know that there are beings that thrive and live normally in the third dimension, the fourth dimension, the fifth, and at least the sixth that all attend meetings inside this biosphere. So in terms of that biosphere and the people that I talk to, that's where they are. And they're just outside of Earth space, relatively close. And yes, to bring us back to center, I have had a number of conversations about the topic of Elenin because there's been so much press about it. And there are subsequent topics to Elenin that we've spent probably no less than 6.5 hours just this week talking about all of the details of these. So I'm happy to address them one by one for you.
Sure. Well, let's start off with just the very entry-level question. What is Elenin?
Okay. Everything that they've told me, and as I've said to you a couple of times, I take this responsibility of wanting and learning very seriously, and I not only double-check, I triple-check the information, whether it's coming through the dream state or visions or through telepathy. By the time I get done writing it down, I've triple-checked it. So as a reference point, here's what they've told me. Elenin is a natural celestial body, a small comet, but it's made up much more of rock than it is of ice and gas. Its purpose is to literally clear the way for the arrival of Takoma, a brown dwarf, which is about the size of Uranus, which is trailing behind it. And Elenin has an elliptical orbit. It'll come into Earth's solar system and, in a manner of speaking, deposit Takoma and then leave. It's going to head back out.
Okay, now, this is where the conversation gets interesting because there have been a number of developments that people have been following through various websites, the Navy website, other websites. First, there was the information that Elenin had broken up. Second, there was information that perhaps some Earth forces, perhaps the U.S. Navy or some component of the U.S. government had fired upon it. And thirdly, that there was a pyramid shape, some sort of tetrahedron that was covering or located in place of Elenin. Could you tell me what this tetrahedron in place of Elenin is?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I only learned about this week, and so this was part of our 3-hour conversation. And they essentially said, yes, we're not only aware of this tetrahedron, this pyramid Tolek that you're asking about, but we're aware of some specific technology, a monitoring device, if you will, that is projecting a pyramid-shaped force field over the general area of Comet Elenin. Pyramid-shaped force field. And to them it seems that only when some kind of catastrophic problem would occur in space that would threaten Comet Elenin would this technology pick up, if you will, this catastrophic event. It would be activated, and this pyramid would then be dispersed, and it would cover and surround Elenin. And it seems the technology also has a bilateral purpose of keeping Elenin and Takoma both on course to minimize possible disruptions by Takoma to Earth's solar system. So I guess this technology does a couple of things, including protect it, but also to keep it on track.
So according to this information, it appears that there's an intelligence that has placed a monitoring technology on Elenin and that Elenin has the function of clearing the way for Takoma into the Earth's solar system. Is that kind of a correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
It's this monitoring device will detect any possible danger. When danger gets close enough, it activates. In Star Trek terminology, out comes the force field, and it protects the comet and anything in the general area of the comet. So it's not only going over the top of the comet, it's protecting anything that's in the area of the comet, which of course would be the planet. Which would be the brown dwarf, Takoma.
Now, there has also been a great deal of speculation on the internet that the arrival of Elenin itself may cause disruptions or Earth changes. Have you discussed this with the Andromeda Council?
We talked about it at length. This is one of those questions that I asked about, and I asked 3 times, and they said no. The arrival of Elenin itself will not cause any disruptions to planet Earth. None.
Okay. Now, in tandem, then, they say that Takoma, Tekoma, Takoma is following Elenin. What is Takoma, according to the Andromeda Council sources?
Right. Takoma is a brown dwarf. Some people say brown dwarf star, some people say brown dwarf. I've seen it written both ways, but in either case, it's a brown dwarf. It is, if you will, trailing Elenin in close proximity. It's about the size of planet Uranus, and it should arrive in Earth's solar system approximately this coming mid-October 2011. And it's expected to settle into this solar system as a new, albeit smaller, but not quite as bright, second sun. And it's expected to settle in place between Venus and Earth, but much closer to Venus than to Earth.
Wow. Let me
brown dwarf.
Yeah. Now let me kind of run through this, because my scientific method side has just clicked in.
Sure. And I know that this is new information that people have not been talking about or hearing about. I mean, people have talked about a brown dwarf, and we can talk about this later, but I know this is new information, so go ahead.
Yeah, and it's not that, and so I'm trying to even picture this. There are images on the internet of Elenin, which we've all seen. As kind of a blue light is the most recent one, at least the most recent one that I've seen in the past week. Now, if Takoma is following in an elliptical orbit behind Elenin and is arriving in the solar system, which means it would arrive into the Pluto orbit, I guess, to that thing, why wouldn't we be seeing it now?
Pretty good question. The best answer that I can give, and they shared this with me, is that the Takoma and what's coming along with it are cloaked. You can't see them because you can't see them. People on Earth are not meant to see them.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
Right. Because, quite honestly, the least amount of excitement for people, the better. And I mean, there's enough excitement. Yeah, there's enough excitement going on about Elenin.
Okay.
So
they're cloaked, and
right.
They're cloaked, presumably by the same intelligence that put the tetrahedron technology onto Elenin.
Right.
Now, do we have any indication as to what that intelligence is, or who that intelligence is, what their identity is?
I don't know. No, I know that they are on the Andromeda Council. They're certainly aware.
Okay.
The Andromeda Council is certainly aware of the technology, and they're aware of the purpose for Elenin and Takoma coming in.
Okay.
There is, it's sort of like anytime you get into the details of a discussion, you can always back out and say, what's the grand plan?
Yeah.
Well, there's a grand plan in place, and part of the grand plan is that in order for Earth to evolve to what it's supposed to become, part of its evolution, and we can talk about this at length later, but part of its evolution is that this solar system is supposed to become a binary star system.
Oh.
And so the bringing in of Takoma is, if you will, the second sun that makes it a binary star system.
Okay, I can see the internal kind of logic to that. Now, but let me ask you this: if Elenin is on an elliptical orbit, and Takoma, although cloaked, is on an elliptical orbit as well, if Takoma then is going to peel off the elliptical orbit and assume a new orbit around the sun, presumably between Venus and Earth.
Right.
How is it going to? What's going to cause it to assume that new orbit?
All right. I'm smiling because we had a piece of this conversation earlier, and I mentioned to you that as a person, I'm much more somebody who is communications driven, philosophically driven, than somebody who has a more pure, absolute science and math mind. So I won't even attempt to get into the mathematics of how they do this, but I'll use a metaphor for you and I and the people who are listening to go, okay, we get it. I can share with you this. As kids growing up, Mom and Dad took us camping. We had a station wagon and later a Suburban, and we hauled a trailer.
Okay.
So imagine Elenin as a station wagon or a Suburban, and Takoma as the trailer.
Okay.
You get to your destination, you drop the block down, you raise up the hitch, you disconnect the two.
Oh.
So Takoma stays, and the Suburban drives off.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know how they're going to do it, but
right.
Geez, if they've got the kind of technology that they can put a tetrahedron, a force field shaped tetrahedron pyramid over a meteoroid comet kind of thing and dwarf star, then they can certainly unhitch a dwarf star and let the let the comet go on its way.
Okay. Now I begin to get so that in terms of the grand scale, the grand plan is for this solar system to go from a single sun to a binary solar system.
That's correct.
And the way that they do it in the universe, I mean, there are rumors about this with regard to the moon, that the moon was also towed here.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that it's not so much that Elenin is towing, but that's an analogy to get my primate brain working, which it did. So it was very useful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And actually, the way they described it, and Zoltar was funny, he's like, it's more like plowing the road.
Right.
Because, you think of it as a plow, and it's anything that's in the way, debris or otherwise, it's just clearing the path, so that Takoma can come in and settle in as easy as possible, with as few disruptions as possible.
Yeah. So this is a big galactic WPA Works Progress Association project.
Yeah, good analogy. Sure.
Basically. Yeah. Well, it's time to get an upgrade.
That's right. Right. And it is, and part from what I've learned, part of this solar system, its evolution is to become a binary star system.
Okay.
It's just part of its evolution, and Takoma was chosen, and it's coming in, and they're going to disconnect the hitch, and off goes Elenin to whatever it's going to do in the future. It's heading out. But Takoma is definitely going to stick around, and it's going to be, like I said, in orbit between Venus and the Earth, but much closer to Venus. Much closer to Venus.
Right. Now, both you and I know myself, I've been a lifelong billiards and pool player, and not that I play that much, but I've been fairly intense. And so you know that when you get up there and you hit a rack, balls go all over the place, and you're always... So that's sort of our introduction to what they call celestial mechanics. Okay?
Okay.
Now, what about the possible disruptions to this solar system? Most importantly to Earth. I mean, you're bringing in Takoma, this brown dwarf, into the solar system. You're bringing it right in between Venus and Earth, and you're launching it into that orbit. I mean, my God, talk about celestial mechanics.
Yeah. And I think the question you're asking is, what's the cause and effect to Earth?
Yeah.
I'm going to provide you with part A and part B of my answers.
Okay.
Part A is very much like with Chairman Darka, Vice Chairwoman Adria, and everybody else that works on that biosphere. That biosphere, in combination of other Andromeda Council flagged biospheres, and I'm going to borrow another Star Trek term, they are projecting out a combination of force fields. These multiple biospheres are using their combined force field technology to, if you will, envelop and buffer planet Earth, so that there is as little disruption to the planet as possible. Now, I talked to them at length about the various possible outcomes and the various possible disruptions, but they've said, we're going to do our best to take care of planet Earth and some of the other planets locally that would be disrupted, that in terms of this inner part of the solar system, as Takoma arrives and settles into place. Now, part B of the answer is, what could happen as Takoma settles into place? You could have some earthquakes, you could have some sea quakes, maybe one in the Pacific, maybe one in the Atlantic. At this point, it's really hard to tell because Takoma is supposed to arrive like in mid-October, about a month, maybe a month and a week from now, somewhere around that. So we're looking at another month of Earth time, and certainly cosmic time, and space is a big place, and there are a lot of things that could happen. We know it's on track to arrive, but we're just going to have to be patient and wait to see what happens and how Takoma settles in. We'll learn what the cause and effects of Takoma will be. I'll be talking, and the part B follow-up is, I will be talking to them again, and we can certainly address this topic of possible disruptions. A week and a half, 2 weeks out, I'll have some more plausible answers in terms of cause and effect.
Okay, good. Now, my monkey brain has kicked in again.
Sure, go ahead.
And with a couple of observations. The first is that today's Friday, September 9th, and about 4 hours ago, a 6.4 earthquake occurred just 25 miles from here, from Vancouver, BC, off coast in the Pacific Ocean. Now, that hasn't happened for at least 5 years. And I find it strangely synchronistic that we're talking about this, and an earthquake happens 25 miles off the coast here.
Right.
Are these quakes at all connected to these celestial events or to what they call the photon belt?
Wow, really, really good question. We could almost title this show "Chicken Soup of the Stars." And why chicken soup? Well, depending on which grandmother you talk to, you'll learn about which ingredients go into her own unique batch of chicken soup.
Yeah.
As a metaphor, I'll just ask you and everybody else to consider that in our general Earth space, and certainly the space surrounding our solar system, as the solar system moves into this higher vibratory area of space called the galactic equatorial plane, which is fourth dimensional energy. Oh yeah, which also has highly magnetic energy of a black hole. That's A and B. C, you've got high amounts of discharge of magnetic plasma energy from the sun. D, E, F. There are all sorts of things making up the soup right now. So I'm not able to tell you exactly what set off this particular quake,
Right.
but as a reference point, I know that a few months ago, maybe 5 or 6 months ago, just south of you, out in the Pacific Ocean, due like northwest of Portland, Oregon, there are a bunch of volcanoes that popped off underwater, and a whole
Right.
bunch of lava that's turned into a new lava field underwater. So
Yeah.
you have this, and again, I'm not a scientist, so I speak a lot in metaphors. You have this chicken soup of cosmic energies all happening to our solar system and at the Earth almost all at the same time. So we're going to feel the cause and effect. As another reference point, I would say that it is highly likely that the people in California, Mexico, and Arizona, the 5 million plus people that lost power because of the coronal mass ejection that popped out a day ago, day and a half ago, right? So what happens? This large coronal mass ejection happens, which comes with it an EMP, electromagnetic pulse. What happens? The West Coast loses power. Surprise. These are all cause and effects. It's. I'm not a mathematician or a scientist, but I pay attention to stuff like this, and it's all part of the cosmic chicken soup that we're talking about.
Right. Now, let me get to a second question, and this really goes to your role as a representative of the Andromeda Council, and to the series, I would say series of very serious messages that you've been given, ranging from the end of the Gray Reptilian War to these messages now that we're sharing. Mid-October 2011 is just around the corner. I mean, Sunday, this coming Sunday is 9/11. So we're almost at mid-September. So it's almost a month away that this cloaked dwarf, brown dwarf, will be entering our solar system, and I'm not sure, we haven't gone into what the timing is of it settling into orbit as a second sun, and when it will become, quote, end of quote, decloaked. Do you have any indication of when it will become decloaked?
I didn't ask. I honestly didn't ask.
Oh, okay.
What I know about it as a body in terms of its size is that it's about the size of the planet Uranus.
Okay.
So it's not that big. And actually, I was thinking about that this weekend. I went outside. We had a clear night sky, and I looked up and I saw Venus. There's this little teeny dot. And I looked over to the east, and I saw Jupiter, which was a much bigger dot and much brighter.
Right.
And so I said, oh, okay, well, that gives me a reference point. I mean, if this thing's only the size of Uranus, or it's not going to be that big. I had visions of seeing something like the size of a dime sitting in our daytime or our night sky. Decidedly not. It's going to be a dot. They basically said, if somebody, and they gave me this visual image, if somebody were to take, I need to check my notes so I say this right. If somebody were to take a pencil, a new unused pencil, Takoma the brown dwarf would be the size of an unused pencil eraser head.
Okay.
And it would sit kind of down around, relatively speaking, down around 4 or 5 o'clock. If you assume that the sun is around clock face, that it'll sit prospectively at around 4 or 5 o'clock. And again, about the size of an unused, brand new pencil eraser head.
Right. Now, here comes one question.
Sure.
What if these events do not occur as predicted? That is, mid-October comes, and we wait and we wait, and there is no decloaked brown dwarf that comes into the orbit between Venus and Earth. Would you then consult with the Andromeda Council? How are we, as sort of the public, then supposed to give credence to the information about the end of the reptilian gray occupation?
Now, this is me. I can only speak for myself and speak to what I've learned from them, what they've told me, and like I said, I take great responsibility in learning the information I learned, so I double check and I triple check before I finally put it into writing in terms of a formal end result on any topic.
Right.
And I'll take them one at a time. Elenin is on its way.
Yeah.
It's a comet, but it's made much more of rock than it is ice and gas.
Okay.
It's got a job. Its job is to clear the way for Takoma.
Okay.
Takoma will be here because it's part of its own destiny, its own cosmic destiny, to turn Earth into a binary star system.
Okay.
I would be extraordinarily surprised if Takoma doesn't come in. And if it doesn't, I'm going to have some real hard questions with the boys upstairs.
Okay, good enough. Well, no, I asked that question because when we did our first program on the end of the reptilian gray occupation, we were able to check that information with outside independent sources, and there was a congruence there.
Sure.
So that, and so here, I'm just asking questions.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. And I haven't answered part B of your question, which is, how does the arrival of Elenin and or Takoma measure up or match with or have anything to do with the topic of the last interview, which is the end of the war in space going on for 10, 11 years between the combined forces of the Andromeda Council and the Orion Gray Reptilian bunch. The two topics have nothing to do with each other. The war is over. The Greys and Reptilians out in space have been defeated.
Yeah.
The people of the Andromeda Council are doing an amazing job here on Earth, cleaning up, if you will, the rats in the woodpile, or rather underneath the woodpile, because they're mostly in underground, undersea bases. But they are cleaning up, without a doubt.
Okay.
So yeah, the war's over. The two topics have nothing to do with each other. The war's over.
Okay, good. Although, from a mega project perspective, perhaps if you're turning this into a binary, from this kind of universal WPA perspective,
Okay.
one of the preconditions was that the solar system had to be cleared of these invaders. This is a speculation. I'm just tossing it out.
Okay.
Okay.
I know, by the way, it's funny that you touch on this because um, Vice Chairwoman Tanya and Zoltar both said to me, we have got to clear these guys out as soon as possible.
Yeah.
They all but came out. Their words were gentle, but they all but came out and said, you know that little earthquake that you guys heard about in Virginia?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, the one in Washington, D.C.? Well, it was no earthquake. If you take a look at the depth of the registered, the measured wave that came out, it wasn't that deep in the ground, was it? No. Well, so that spurred me to ask some questions, and the bottom line is, we used a sonic pulse. We gave them, I'm going to back up, we gave them, the rats in the tunnel, the rats in the maze, more than enough warning, more than enough advisement, enough conversations have been held to say, stop messing with the people of planet Earth and get out, specifically in that country's nation's capital. Leave them alone. I'm like, no, we're here, we got a job to do. So they said, all right, so we it. A concentrated sonic wave pulse. And think of what happens when you put a lid on a Tupperware jar and then you thump it. Well, that thump, in essence, is what they did. And that thump collapsed a whole bunch of the caves underneath that area and killed a whole bunch of greys and reptilians. And, it's not an action that the Andromeda Council likes to take. But they warned them enough times. Any of the guys in the war that were left over, they rounded up and they sent through a Stargate out to the far edge of the universe. These guys weren't going to leave. They're like, fine, so be it. So I know we hadn't talked about this, but there are things that happen that they have to do in order to cleanse Earth so it can evolve. And the manipulative negative energy of the reptilians and the greys is not, and therefore the control and the manipulation of Earth's population is not part of its evolution.
I'm very, very glad that you mentioned this and that you brought that up because of the letters and emails that we've gotten from our first interview. Those have been the most moving. People who say how relieved they are that now humanity can find its own destiny. So before we continue the interview, I just wanted to note that.
When I take time to sit back and think about the magnitude and the importance of everything I've learned, that's the information that has the greatest impact on me. That after, and I don't know exactly how many years, but after many, many thousands of years that Earth people have been manipulated in many forms and fashion, have been manipulated to and been incited to be fearful, to be anxious of what their next day is going to be like. I'm just, as somebody who's part of the human race, I'm really happy to know that we're finally being set free, and we can finally become who we're meant to be. Each of us shining little sparkling parts of the Creator and parts of creation, and that we can evolve on our own without being messed with. That's the important part. That we'll no longer be messed with, and we can evolve. That's the part that gives me chills and makes me smile. As somebody who lives here.
Exactly.
it's not an easy life. You know, the majority of us, we got jobs, we work hard, we have to deal with bills, we have to deal with issues. There are aspects of life which are fun, you know, when we do things with our family or friends, but it's a challenging life. It shouldn't be like this.
Yeah.
It should not be this hard. That's the bottom line. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Well, maybe the end of the occupation and our moving, well, we'll be talking about that. So I don't want to get too far ahead of us.
Yeah.
Now, let me return to the issue of brown dwarfs. I know that people have spoken about a brown dwarf that is occasionally visible from Earth next to Earth's sun. Is there any substance to this, or what?
There certainly is. And I'm glad you asked the question because I've been made aware of this over time. And so I asked the guys upstairs, and they said, yep, there certainly is. It's been there a long time. And it's in the process of turning from a red dwarf into a brown dwarf. You know, it's in that decreasing stage. But as measured from Sol, Earth's sun, dwarf, this thing's 3 billion light years away, distant from our sun. So because of the distance, that's why we on Earth really see it. You know, it just kind of peaks up over the kind of the horizon every once in a while, but then it goes back down again. It's just at 3 billion light years away, we don't see it that often. So it's, you know, kind of a non-event in terms of cause and effect on our own solar system.
Okay. Now, let's go back to Takoma. Now, you have to understand, from my point of view, which is as a terrestrial human, and that I just received the news that a brown dwarf, which is now cloaked, is coming to our solar system within the next 5 to 6 weeks. And so, naturally, this is a great surprise, and I'm very skeptical at the same time, because I can't even remember my pre-lunar culture. That is, what was the Earth's culture before the moon? I mean, I read fragments of alleged pre-lunar literature, but as far as I know, the only culture that is part of the mainstream that we have has always had a moon. And
right,
if, like Takoma coming in, the moon was also moved in as part of the universal furniture moving service. I'm just using these analogies to get over my own personal shock, and also to say that I'm hedging it a bit. Okay, I'm going to play Doubting Thomas.
You have a right. Go ahead.
You know, the day that sun appears, I'll say, by gosh, look at that sun in the sky, and I'll be an expert on that sun. But
right.
Why is, I know that we've gone over it, but sometimes it takes a couple of times for people to get things. Why is Takoma coming into Earth's solar system?
Okay. I know the answer that I've given you, which is this event and its arrival is part of its own evolution. Now, I stand by that answer, but I'll give you a different answer. And you'll forgive me, but I'm going to use you as an example. And,
okay.
And I'll do it with respect, certainly.
No, sure.
You have evolved into a well-respected journalist, probably the most leading futurist in exopolitics thinking. And you use a critical, legal, analytical mind to do the work that you do. But I would imagine that if I asked you when you were 30-something years old and working in what was, I guess, the New York City's Environmental Protection Department, would you be where you are today? You don't have a crystal ball to say, oh, it's my evolution to become the leading futurist thinker of exopolitic thought.
No. Actually, that's okay. I'll just take a short footnote because I had to answer that question to yet another luminary interviewer this past week, and that is, while I was General Counsel of the Environmental Protection Administration, because DARPA CIA had time traveled my book Exopolitics, Politics, Government, and Law in the Universe. They had time traveled it from 2005 back to 1971, and they had it. They arranged a phony environmental speech for me in front of 50, count them, 50 CIA, DARPA, and Time Travel Project personnel. And I went there and I gave this speech, and I knew that it was cognitive dissonance. And I said, these guys are not environmentalists. They look like spooks to me. So I was being inspected back then for what I am now. So that's a very apt question. That's just a footnote I wanted to toss in.
Right. And
back to you. Sorry for hijacking your interview.
No, it's okay. It's all right. And it's a relevant question because the question still comes down to, well, why is it coming to Earth's solar system?
Yeah.
Well, you are who you are today because of your own evolution, right? And I guess the only reference that I can give you is the people that live in that. I mean, when I say live, I'm being literal. We here on Earth, as a comparison, we live, thrive, breathe, and work in a dense third-dimensional environment. And things have solid weight and mass. We're third-dimensional as a comparison. The people in the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension, the sixth dimension, they can time travel. You have to be in the fourth dimension to time travel. And they can look forward in time, and they can look backward in time, and they can look into the future and say, if you will, cosmically, we've seen that it is the destiny of Takoma and whatever's coming along with it to become part of Sol, the sun's solar system. So we've seen that it's part of its own evolution. So, I wasn't there being able to say, to look at Alfred and say, something, in 20 years, this man is going to be the leading futurist exopolitic thinker in the 2000 era. You weren't even able to do it. But you know what? If we had the access to time travel or to be able to look at a scale of, the year 2000, 2010, 2030, somebody would have said, Alfred Leibler Weber is in fact the leading exopolitics thinker. Why? It's his evolution. That's what he's going to become.
Right.
So that's the answer.
No, I got you.
That's the answer.
Now, bringing us back to Takoma, what were you trying to illustrate by that analogy?
Well, I guess the bottom line is, yes, Takoma is going to arrive. In comparison to the sun, as a reference point, let's say the sun is, $0.50 that we're really using these days.
Right.
To the lower right-hand corner, around 4 or 5 o'clock, you'll see a little orange ball. This is daytime. That's putting off orange light, and it's about the size of, again, an unused pencil eraser.
Right.
That's daytime sky.
Yeah.
And nighttime sky, you'd see Takoma as a mixture of pale yellow and pale orange color, kind of like on a clock face. And I'm just using one snapshot of time. You'd see Takoma at around 8 o'clock on a clock face.
Okay.
You'd see Nihohia, which we're going to discuss.
Oh.
Which, something else. which will seem to have horizontal bands of pale pink, pale purple, and pale blue colors, and its own moon as pale bluish color, to just due to the northeast, like instead of 8 o'clock, we'll see them clustered like at around 7 o'clock. And as an example, we'll see our own bright Earth's moon at around 2 p.m., so kind of like the far northeast sky.
So
at nighttime, these bodies are going to look a little bigger than they do during the day. And on top of that, because you have these new bodies, and keep in mind, Takoma is a brown dwarf, so it throws off orange light. It produces its own light. We're not going to have a pure... as an example, if there's no moon or a new moon, we would have a pure black sky with lots of stars. And you'd be able to see a lot. Well, from the point in time that Takoma and Nihohia arrives, we'll no longer have a pure black sky. Our sky will pretty much be twilight. Maybe somewhere between twilight and think of a real big full moon fully illuminating the night sky. You're going to have a night sky that's much more twilight than it is dark.
So this will be more like our part of the world in the Yukon with the land of the midnight sun, but not
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said. That's a really good comparison.
Now, What is the evolutionary sense in that? I mean, people kind of like their sleep, you know? Or maybe that's the point, this is like the post-sleep era?
Yeah, well, that's part of evolution into the fourth dimension. I understand that. Yeah, I understand. In the fourth, we only need like 2 or 3 hours because we vibrate at a different rate. But
I see.
I don't know the complete answer to that topic yet. But at least initially, every time nighttime hits around the world, people will be looking up in the sky and seeing some new planetary bodies or new stars and a much brighter sky. Maybe not as bright as the land of the midnight sun, but certainly not as dark as we have today.
And a lot of more different colors. I mean, painters are going to go wild.
Right. Well, Takoma is always going to throw off this orange color, whether it's nighttime or daytime. But this planet that is bringing with it, and we'll talk about it, this planet, Nihohia, is, it's got pale pink, pale purple, pale blue colors in horizontal bands. Very cool looking. Really neat. When they showed it to me, I was like, wow, that's cool. So, I don't know, with the guys who have pretty good telescopes, they'll be able to see those bands of pale pink, pale purple, and pale blue.
Now,
because, keep in mind, these things are all parking closer to Venus than they are to the Earth.
Now, you're not going to believe it because they say that when you're having fun, time flies. We have already come to the end of this 1 hour segment. So what we're going to do is take a break, and when we come back, we'll address the question of what will Earth's daytime sky look like with Takoma in it. This is ExopoliticsTV. I'm Alfred Weber, and we've been with Tolik, representative of the Andromeda Council, talking about possible future events coming up in our mutual solar system. Please stay tuned. Thank you.